Is it really that important to block a narcissist? How important does it actually matter? Is it actually to block him from having access to you? Let's talk about this today. Blocking and going no contact is a hot topic a lot of times when we're dealing with narcissists and narcissistic abuse. Now, let's go ahead and get rid of the elephant in the room. Okay. When we're dealing in this piece of going no contact, one of the first thing that pops up is like, I have kids, so this doesn't apply to me. And first off, I need you to understand it definitely applies to you. And I need you to stop thinking with a limited mindset. And I don't say this to be mean, but I do say this to let you know that I know hundreds of people that have kids and are completely no contact. It is possible. It might not be that you can't figure it out because you don't have the right, like don't have the resources, or you're not resourceful enough. Consider one of those might be the case. We might need to get something else that's going to help you do this, or you might have to get other people, apps, tools, things like that to be able to help you move to a place of no contact. But it is possible. It might not be easy, but it is possible. So just understand and like break your frame for just a moment. Just consider and pause for a moment. What if it was possible? How could you actually do it? If it was possible, what would you need to put in place? Now, there's multiple levels to this when you're dealing with a parenting situation. You can just set up a buffer. No FaceTime, no phone calls. Go down to email, and go down to text messaging on a secured app approved by the court, and go through a third party, go through communicating through attorneys, whatever it might be. Like, you can do different ways to be completely no contact, and there's a lot of people that do it. So understand, he wants you to think and believe that it's impossible. And if you believe it's impossible, then you'll act like it's impossible, then you'll never do it. But there's a lot of people that have. So let's go back to the piece of no contact. Okay. Just dealing with the aspect of no contact and the question of like, do I have to? Right? Like, is this something where it really matters that I block? Does it really matter? The answer is yes. The reason why we're dealing with this piece of blocking is simply because we have to be able to create space to heal. People that stay in toxic relationships do not maintain and keep space to actually heal. As a result, when they're in the relationship and they're trying to heal, they typically only get healed about 60% of the way, and then they stall out. Simply because when you're in that toxic environment over and over and over again, it doesn't allow you to fully get clean. It doesn't allow you to fully get off of these triggers and the effects and the things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. Consider for a moment there's this pond. And inside this pond, there's got a lot of sludge and dirt in it. It's just nasty. It's got this like garbage. It's like floating on the top. And you're over on the edge of this pond, and you've stepped into the pond, and you're in this about like 4 or 5 foot section of the pond that's actually clean. And the reason why it's clean is because you've got this net and you're scooping out the garbage and you're throwing it out. You're scooping out the garbage and you're throwing it out. You're scooping out the garbage and you're throwing it out. And so your section of the pond actually looks pretty clean. Like, people could actually come in and like swim in that section of the pond. They'd be like, hey, this is actually pretty cool. This is a nice pond. But what people don't realize, and what you don't realize, is on the other end of the pond, as you walk over there, there is this big old just a pipe that's pouring this sludge into the pond. It's pouring this garbage, it's pouring all this toxic stuff into the pond. And as you watch, you just see it's just pouring in. And no matter how much you start bailing out all this garbage on the other side, this pipe is actually flowing more and more and more. It doesn't stop. There's not a reprieve from it. It just keeps coming, piling up more and more shit on that side of the pond. That comes over to your side of the pond, and you start to bail it out. Now, in this illustration, the pond is your life, your energy, your aura, your area that this person is interacting with. And the toxicity and all the things that are coming in, the garbage, is all the triggers, all the things that he's putting, pressing, and placing upon you that's not actually letting you heal. So, at the very least, when we talk through no contact, we need to start limiting. Now, when we start limiting, what it's doing is it's reducing that pipe size. It means you're getting less and less garbage in. If we're talking about limiting, it could simply be like the very first stage could be you setting your phone to do not disturb, or you turning hide your notifications so that when he texts you, you don't see it, so you don't instantly respond, because we have to untrain you of simply being like the responsive person that keeps texting him, because if you don't, you'll get in trouble. Like, we have to be able to help actually provide a buffer. That buffer is that reduction of the pipe. It's not completely no contact. It's not completely shut off, but at least a reduction of it, because the more we reduce it, then the less it's going to affect you. This is what we have to do. Now you're like, but okay, I get the illustration of the pond and I get all this, but he's really not affecting me. It's really not that big of a deal. And I want you to consider that it's been a period of time that you've been with this guy, and it's going to continue to affect you to multiple levels, to multiple degrees. Let me explain. When you're in a toxic relationship, you get conditioned how to think, how to behave, how to respond, how to act. Those conditions over a period of time stick with you. It's not a piece that they just simply go away. It's not a piece that they magically disappear. They stick with you for a long period of time. For instance, I know with my wife that there's still triggers that would put her right back into the same exact place. Right back into the same exact place where she would feel abused, or where she would feel traumatized, or where it activate the fight or flight. Simply put, like, it would be easy to press triggers and have this happen. Now, I've done this a couple times unintentionally. There was one time that our daughter was just having this outrageous tantrum, and she started to get to where she was like yelling and screaming at my wife. That was a piece that frustrated me because I didn't want her to show that type of disrespect. Me being in the place that I was and the parenting mindset that I was at that point, I was like, well, this kid needs to get it, needs to understand. So I walked into the room and my wife's back is to me and she's trying to work with her daughter. And her daughter's irate. She's getting ready to like try, she's like hitting, like she's doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm just kind of like, whoomph. And when I go whoomph and just like yell, trying to like stop the situation, trying to get her back to being like, okay, this is not how we act. I didn't realize that my wife didn't see me come in. And so she didn't see me come in. I come in behind her to be able to yell at my daughter, be like, stop. Like, we're not doing this. This is not how you treat your mom. And when I did that, it triggered a response in Kayla. Like, it triggered an automatic response in her where all of a sudden she like jumped up and pushed me away and she was in fight or flight mode, like instantly. But it was a piece that I didn't realize was going to happen by how I interacted with our daughter. So what I mean by this is this has been through healing. This has been for multiple years that those responses haven't happened. They're still in there. So when you think, oh, it's not really going to affect me, it's not really that big of a deal, yeah, that's a lie. Because you've been in a toxic, traumatizing relationship, it means you're going to have certain triggers that all he has to do is press the right ones and you're going to go off. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get triggered. You're going to get traumatized. You're going to move into a fight or flight mode. And so this is what he's counting on because he knows you're not going to go no contact. Like, you're not brave enough to do that. You're too naive to do that. Like, there's so many things. He's like, oh, well, you're just going to stay contact. And you think, well, that's okay. Let me stay in contact and it's not that big a deal. I'll just control my responses, which is great. Great idea, great thought process. But the majority of time, you don't control a drinking addiction by sitting at the bar being like, I'm just going to control it this time. No, you remove yourself from it so you can actually heal. So you can actually rewire the mindset. So you can change the thought process. You have to remove yourself out of the relationship so you can actually fully heal. So if you ever re-engage with that relationship or another toxic relationship, you can see it for what it is and you can walk away. No contact is very essential for the healing because if you don't separate yourself and provide this buffer, it's going to continue to be a place that he's going to use and trigger you. This happens many times. People think like, oh, well, I won't talk to him, but I'm not going to block him because blocking seems a little too aggressive. That's just not me. What you're saying is you're not really interested in investing time and energy into yourself. You're actually still continuing the abuse and being like, well, I'm not worthy, protecting my space. Instead, you're like, oh, I just want to be a people pleaser. We'll run into that too. I want you to consider for a moment that when you leave the door open, all he does is he just continues to knock. And you think, well, I'm strong enough. You haven't been, which is why you've been cycling in the relationship. You haven't been because you've been watching this content for so long. Let's be honest. But when it comes down to it, you don't want to block and you stay in a place where you're like, well, I'm just not going to respond. Well, do you respond when he says happy birthday? Do you respond when he says Merry Christmas? Do you respond when you've had a hard day and you're emotional and he texts? You will. And I've seen it happen hundreds of times. Because if you don't actually set up healthy boundaries for you, you will cross over the line and you will go back to a toxic guy thinking that it'll be okay, thinking that it'll be better, feeling like maybe if I just interact with him this one time, then I'll get my closure, then I'll feel better, etc., etc. And it doesn't change. There's the same cycle happens over and over and over again. We have to be able to break the cycle. If we don't break the cycle, you stay stuck forever. This whole piece of breaking the cycle is essential and has to happen. And if we do not break it by going no contact, if we do not break it by blocking, then he knows he can still get in your life. He can still trigger you. He can still mess with you. He can still affect you over and over. If you're dealing with kids, then we have to approach it a little bit different angle, giving you buffer and starting to work on providing just more and more space between the communication, so that you actually have time to heal. So we can actually focus on breaking the trauma bond, eradicating the triggers, building up your boundaries, and helping you discover who you are again.